Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of DATI Civic and Peace Education Audiovisual Series, Episode 11, Conflict Resolution. What is conflict? In the past 10 episodes, we discussed different issues regarding peace building in Liberia at this time. And we started with, my speech to the Bond County citizens, urging them to vote wisely in the forthcoming election and also not to be fooled, not to allow themselves to be fooled by politicians who go to them because Bond County is a vote-rich county. So they go to coax the people to ask them for their votes. And after they've received their votes, then they no longer have interest in the people. So it's not just only Bond County citizens, it's also Nima County citizens, citizens in Montserrat County, and other counties, the various counties in Liberia, that at this time, given the situation that you are undergoing, it is important for you to make wise decisions. But in order for you to make the wise decisions, you need something like what DATI is providing for you on various radio stations in Monrovia, Kepamas, and in Banga. And we hope that with, the provision of funds, from various national and international NGOs in Liberia and abroad, that we may be able to broaden our broadcasts across the entire nation so that all of you can receive, the same information regarding what you need to know about your country, the running of the government, and also your rights, privileges, and responsibilities as citizens of Liberia and also as voters, in whose hands lies, the security of Liberia as well as your own happiness and livelihood. Today, we are beginning a series of lectures on conflict resolution. And we want to clearly define conflict. And then also we will go into different aspects of conflict and also to inform you how you, as an individual Liberian citizen, as an individual citizen of your own nation, not just only Liberia, how you can be of help in maintaining the peace and rule of law in your own society. So today we want to begin with conflict resolution. And with respect to conflict resolution, we want to first of all define conflict. What is conflict? Conflict is a natural trend in the existence of all human beings because where two or more persons are gathered, there has got to be differences of opinion or what we call conflict. This is obvious because no two individuals are exactly alike in build, in character, or in thinking, not even identical twins. In this light, there are varied forms of conflicts, such as intrapersonal conflicts, whereby one may be in conflict within himself or herself. Interpersonal conflict is one in which two individuals may have a disagreement. Then you can also have intergroup or interethnic conflict, which entails differences of opinion between groups of persons or different ethnic groups. And then, of course, you have international conflicts that may take place between two or more nations. And then also I included in the In the PowerPoint, I included genocide and international conflicts. I included genocide, international conflicts, and so I want us to discuss the different types of conflicts. The first type of conflict that we want to talk about is intrapersonal conflicts. That word intrapersonal is spelled INTRAPERSONAL. INTRA is the prefix, which means inside of you, inside, intra, and then personal. So it's something that is happening to you personally. There are times in our lives that we have, we are suffering, we're being bothered with something from whether an idea, or we are suffering from indecision. And that confusion that we experience within ourselves is not that we're dealing with someone, but just you alone. You're all by yourself. And sometimes you're even talking to yourself. Oh, if I had known, I would have done this. Oh, if I had known, I would have done this. Oh, I shouldn't have said what I said. That kind of situation where you are all by yourself, and or you are dealing with something that bothers you without any kind of contact or communication with another person. That kind of conflict is called intrapersonal conflicts. So intrapersonal conflict is the first beginning. If we want to resolve conflicts peacefully, if we want to live in peace and harmony, the first thing that anyone has to do is to be able to live in peace with yourself. That's the first step in conflict resolution. In conflict resolution, in order for you to live at peace with others, you must be at peace with yourself. And what do I mean by this? As a person, as an individual, first of all, you must know who you are. You must know who you are. You are born in a family, whether you are the fourth child or the first child, whether your family is poor or your family is rich. All those kinds of conditions will determine who you are and what your problems will be in life. So the first thing is to know who you are. If you are born in a poor family, an illiterate family, you know that some of your challenges will be learning, being able to go to school, to get an education, so that you don't continue the type of life that your parents, lived or are living. And also, if you are from a poor family, you know that you have to work hard in order for you to earn your livelihood. These days, people don't want to work hard to earn their livelihood. Honestly, most of the time, they want to just bypass all of the different steps you need to take. Go to school, learn your craft, apply for a job, you get a job, and you work honestly. You don't steal what doesn't belong to you. People don't want to follow those things again. These days, they just want to go jump ropes, and go become rich overnight. And that in itself creates a greater conflict for the entire society, because now you are taking things that don't belong to you, that belong to other people. You are depriving other citizens of the benefits that they should be receiving, such as good medical care, such as a good highway that may enable people to travel from one region of the country to go to the other region to visit their families, to go on business trips, and all those kinds of things. People are deprived of those things when you take money that doesn't belong to you, that are intended to provide those public services, etc. So we're talking about intrapersonal conflict. So part of conflict resolution has to do with, first of all, dealing with yourself as an individual. As an individual, Who am I? How do I live with myself? How do I take care of myself? Because sometimes some people just don't care about themselves. Some people just don't feel self-confidence. Uh, and that in itself is part of what we call intrapersonal conflict. They are not sure of themselves when they go among people. They are scared. They are shy. So with respect to that, that's why sometimes you have people who are introverts. They are introverts, meaning that they're within themselves. They like to stay by themselves. They don't like to go among people. They don't feel comfortable being among people. There are other people who are extroverts. They are very good at mingling with people, making friends, going in crowds and, dealing with people and all of that. So the first part of the conflict that we need to address is that conflict within us. And the reason why it's important is because it also influences your behavior towards others. There are people who, for instance, have intrapersonal conflicts that are unresolved, that they are not able to manage. And the next thing you know, they carry their intrapersonal conflict to the job site. Musu comes into the workplace early in the morning, and you say, "Hi, Musu," and she just passes right by you, brushes past you without even speaking, without responding, which is something that is quite unlikely in the workplace. And then sometimes it makes you want to say, "Oh, I wonder I did something to Musu, why she's not talking to me, or why she didn't answer me." And sometimes you try to be a little more civil, and a little concerned and say, "Hi, Musu, did I do anything to you? You better get on my face, huh? You better move from here." You've not really done anything to Musu, but at this stage, Musu is going through an intrapersonal conflict that she's not able to manage. And now she's at a workplace. She's taking her her personal life situations, she's taking it out there, and she's using you now as the scapegoat to air out her frustrations and her intrapersonal conflict issues that she's experiencing. So intrapersonal conflict is important, that we be at peace with ourselves as an individual in order for us to be at peace with other people. Then the other aspect of conflict is interpersonal conflict. This again is another prefix, inter, meaning to interact with somebody, to relate to someone else. So interpersonal conflict is different from intrapersonal conflict. Intrapersonal conflict, we told you, has to do with your own confusion, your own emotions, things that are bothering you, that you're going through, that sometimes you may not be able to withstand, and you go and air it out, or use someone else as a scapegoat to air out your frustration and your anger. So intrapersonal conflict is important. And so that's why when you have that kind of conflict that you're not able to manage, you're not able to control, it's always good for you to speak to somebody else that you trust, that you can share this problem with, so that they can give you some advice for you to overcome it. So the second type of conflict we want to talk about, which says interpersonal conflict. So now at this stage, it's not just the conflict that you are faced with within you, but now you have a conflict or disagreement, or conflicts like a disagreement, or in like red English, you call it plava. Yeah, plava. You and somebody make plava like conflict because you disagree on something. People don't just make plava when they share the same views and they're happy, with each other. People usually make plava because they disagree on an idea, on an issue, on an expression that someone made or whatever it is. But we're talking about interpersonal conflict now. So first you need to deal with yourself to make sure that you are okay, you can be at peace with yourself so that you can be at peace with other people. And then interpersonal conflict is where now we're dealing with another person. So you have a friend called Peter. Peter is a completely different person from you. Peter is not the same as you. That's why in the introduction, we talked about conflict and we said that no two individuals are the same. Also, when two or more individuals get together, when they sit in one place, they may not always agree on the same thing. Even people who are your classmates or people who are members of your same ethnic group or people who are members of your football team, you all don't always agree on something because there will always be differences of opinions. So interpersonal conflict now is where you have differences of opinion between two or more persons. And of course, when that happens, how do you address it? Is what we're going to be talking about as well. Then the next level will be intra-ethnic conflict. There are, all of the different ethnic groups in Liberia have had warfare, they've had conflicts among themselves. Crown people have fought among them, different subgroups have fought among themselves, different Mano, Dio, Pele, Loma, Kisi, Bandi, Gola, or ethnic groups have fought among themselves, just Gola, Kisi and Kisi, Loma and Loma, Mandingo and Mandingo. So we call that kind of conflict intra-ethnic conflict because it's the same people from the same ethnic group fighting among themselves. So that can happen. So also that means that people within the ethnic groups, must also learn how to be at peace with one another because they live in the same country, they live on the same land, and they have to live together, they have to interact. So whatever, disagreement that occurs amongst them, they need to harmonize it. And the different ethnic groups have their own traditional way of resolving conflict, which is quite different from the way how we resolve conflict based on the Western governance system. So in the resolution of any conflict that relates to the Republic of Liberia, there must be the use of both methods of conflict resolution in Liberia, involving one, the traditional method and also the Western method, so that that conflict is, the resolution of that conflict is culturally relevant. As we discuss, I will point out why the Liberian conflict resolution process became a failure, is a failure, and has come to a standstill because some of these cultural procedures were not followed, and even the westernized cultural resolution procedures were not also adhered to, in the process. So that is why we're at this stage. So I will also explain that to you as we go on, but let's continue with the different types of conflict. So we have the intra-ethnic conflict, then you have the intergroup or inter-ethnic conflict also. Now this one means that the conflict extends outside of your ethnic group, where your ethnic group is, in conflict with another ethnic group, where the Kisi may be in conflict with the Mande, or the Loma may be in conflict with the Mandingos, like that. So when that happens again, or how do we resolve a conflict of that nature? we need to know first of all, culturally, how do the Lamas address conflict? How do the Mandingos address conflict and come to a compromise regarding that, so that people are satisfied, that they understand the process, that they agree to it, and that they work together to maintain, to sustain the peace that may evolve from the resolution of that conflict. So we have intergroup or interethnic conflict. Then we have civil conflict or civil war. The civil war, is where people in the same country are fighting one another. People regard the Liberian conflict, as a quote unquote civil war. But that, in my opinion, as a Liberian playwright, as a scholar, and someone with vast experience, dealing with Liberian culture, I strongly believe that the classification of what happened in Liberia was wrongly diagnosed or wrongly titled. It was not a civil war, the way in which it went, or rather, it was a genocide. So I have genocide there, where for instance, people or armed people or people who have the authority, who usurp authority in the country or create insurrection, are going after specific type of people. And that happened in the Liberian genocide, where people were going specifically after Mano, Gio, Mandingo, Crown people, and sometimes Congo people. They were going looking for those people specifically to kill them, to get rid of them. That is not a characteristic of a civil war. That's a genocide. And the international negotiators, mediators who mediated the Liberian peace process, stalled peace process, did not take into consideration this aspect of the conflict that took place in Liberia. And so at this time, it's not being given the type of attention and also the kind of international support that is needed to bring the perpetrators to justice. Also because of the method of conflict resolution that was used. In the traditional conflict resolution, there's no way where the perpetrator would be rewarded with, state power, would be rewarded access to the coffers of the nation, to plunder the coffers of the nation at their own whims and caprices, as is done in Liberia. That again, we will, discuss. Then you have international conflicts that may involve two countries or more countries in a disagreement, maybe disagreement over the political boundary between the two countries, disagreement with respect to trade or whatever it is, etc. Some of that disagreement may be just only vocal. Sometimes it may be violent, exchange of arms and arm fires and all of that. So there are different types of conflicts, that we will be discussing. So let me go back to the scripts and just read a couple of things here for you. Conflict is a natural trend in the existence of all human beings because where two or more persons are gathered, there's got to be differences of opinion or conflict. This is obvious because no two individuals are exactly alike in build, character, or in thinking, not even identical twins. In this light, there are various forms of conflict, such as intrapersonal conflict, interpersonal conflict, intergroup, inter-ethnic, ethnic, international conflict, etc. So against this backdrop, conflict has its positive and negative outcomes as a natural or man-made human event. Therefore, it has the propensity to do the following things. And we want to talk about that with the conflict. When a conflict occurs, it can be looked at from several different, angles. It may have positive and negative impacts on the conflict. For instance, a conflict can cause a division among people. So the conflict that took place in Liberia, did it cause division among the Liberian people? Certainly, it caused a lot of division among the Liberian people. But if you were a Liberian who was able to manage your intrapersonal conflicts with respect to what you think about other ethnic groups and all of that, and you were able to also maintain a good interpersonal relationship with people and still maintain that relationship without being caught up in the confusion, the propaganda, and the lies, the hate speeches that were made by politicians and warlords to incite people against, one ethnic group against the other, that uh, would serve a better purpose, for peace in the country. But unfortunately, because of the high illiteracy rates in Liberia and misinformation and hate speeches, delivered by politicians and warlords and all of that, it created a lot of, division among the people of Liberia. So conflict uh, may result in the positive or negative impacts. So one of the negative impacts will be it causes division among the people. It also caused the conflict in Liberia caused human and material destructions. It caused human and material destructions. Over 250,000 people lost their lives. People's properties were destroyed. The entire infrastructure of the country was broken down. That's conflict. That's what conflict does. That's what conflict does. But also conflicts, in a conflict situation, it may motivate and change the mindset of persons involved in the conflict and bring about a change in the relationships. So sometimes it can be positive during this, the Liberian war or genocide. A lot of people develop the habit of traveling, because most of the time prior to that time, Liberians hardly traveled outside of Liberia. But when this thing happened, today Liberians are all over the world. Is it good? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, you may look at it from both ways. People may want to return to Liberia, but because of the safety situation in the country right now, they prefer to be where they feel safer than to come to a place where they are uncertain of their safety. That's one way to look at it. But other Liberians who traveled around to different countries, like myself, went to school, attained an education, skills. They were given opportunities to use those skills in the new society in which they find themselves. They may help them to contribute meaningfully and also to gain more money, be paid on time so that they, can pay, can send some kind of relief to the people in Liberia. And today, because of Liberians who live in the diaspora, millions of dollars are are wired every day to Liberia, to relatives. People here, Liberians here in the States, in Europe, in other parts of the world, always think about the people back home, how they are suffering, and they always send them some money and all of that. So it's also a good thing as they made a lot of people, to come abroad and also to be able to help the people back home who are suffering. Four, a conflict may be based on various socio-cultural and political factors, such as, for example, the religious clash between Muslims and Christians. So sometimes that can happen. And this is why civic education is very important, because if people knew their their civic responsibilities, if they knew about a bit of the Constitution, the rights, and privileges of Liberian citizens, then we wouldn't be going to the extent where one set of, denomination would go against another set of denomination. Why? Because in the Constitution, it stipulates that we enjoy freedom of religion. So those who want to be Christians are welcome to be Christians, and the Muslims have no right to ask a Christian why you are Christian, or to condemn the Christian man's belief, and faith, and it's vice versa. You who are Christian got no right to tell a Muslim why are you a Muslim, and or that a Muslim religion is this and that. You got no business to do that constitutionally. If somebody says he's a Muslim, you must respect that person for his faith and what he believes in, just how you want to be respected, for your faith and what you believe in. So in that way, if we practice that, then there wouldn't be any kind of a clash between any two religions in the country, because first of all, we all should know that in Liberia, we enjoy freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of choice, freedom of censure. We can decide whether we want to do this or we don't want to do that. Nobody can force us to be a Muslim. Nobody can force us to be a Christian. That's very important. And also, when you're talking about religion and you talk about beliefs and faiths, if we critically look at what happened in Liberia, you will find out that the bulk of the people who bought the weapons, who gave the weapons to little children to go and shoot people and all of that, they were Christians. How do they, compromise that situation where you are a Christian, where you're supposed to forgive or whatever it is? But yeah, and some of them were pastors, they were bishops, in the different Christian churches and all of that. And they went and they bought weapons to come and kill people. And then on Sunday, you go to church to say you're singing sweet hour of prayer, and yes, what's that? Jesus is love, and Jesus is this and that. So there is an issue with that. And while there is separation of state and church, the state and the Constitution and those who are making laws must also address this issue where people are using religion, to create chaos. The same thing happened with the Muslims too. There are Muslim people that use money, bought guns and stuff to also wage the genocide that took place and or to defend themselves, especially in the case of the Mandingos, who were caught in the middle of this political game that was played and all of that. So the conflict may also be based on various socio-cultural, political factors, religious factors as well. And a conflict may involve differences of ideologies. and governance strategies, and consequently lead to a plot to overthrow a government or to wage a war, as in the case of the Liberian genocide. So you saw that in the Liberian genocide, officials of government of the True Weak Party who were deposed, and also some of whom were summarily executed without due process. Now that's very important. What happened was that people were so angry, because of the long power rule of the settlers, that when the coup took place, instead of maintaining law and order, instead of abiding by the Constitution, if you have uh, um, allegations against anyone, any people, or whatever it is, those allegations in a country where there's a constitution, where a rule of law abides, and which is a democratic and republican form of government, the wisest thing to have done was that those who were alleged for rampant corruption in Liberia should have been given a due process in the courts, not to be taken on the post, to summarily execute them. Well, the consequence of that was that their children, their loved ones, relatives, um, as well as those who were deposed that wanted to come back in power, got together, including some intellectuals, who were supposed to know the difference, to advise, those enlisted men who know you cannot do this and do that. They were also in the forefront, cheering for that kind of thing to happen. So the consequences now is what we're going through with, these same set of people, regrouping, getting all the international support that it needed to come and wage a war, a genocidal war on the people of Liberia. So the issue we're talking about, conflict resolution. So these different factors were not, in my opinion, really analyzed as they should have been, for the benefit of the Liberian people and to maintain law and order in the country. So, for example, members of the deposed True Party of Liberia and relatives and sympathizers of the 13 former government officials of the Totma regime who were arbitrarily executed without due process of law on April 22, 1980, as well as armed forces of Liberia soldiers and members of security and paramilitary apparatuses of the Liberian government derelicts, those who, left the army. They were AFF people, but then they went and joined the rebels and pretended like they were AFF people and killing, innocent people and all of that, and leaving the blame on the AFF. All of them took up arms and launched a rebel incursion on Liberian territory from neighboring La Cote d'Ivoire Cote d'Ivoire, in order to regain political and economic power in Liberia. In addition, a conflict may also have many consequences. A conflict may be beneficial to those who engage in it if the reasons for the conflict are solely based on economic gains and self-aggrandizement, and to exploit the meager resources of the country, as Charles Taylor and other Liberian warlords and the cohorts did in areas under the control of the warring factions during the heat of hostilities. And B, there may also be serious consequences of conflict that includes the destruction of human lives and properties, like total destruction of the infrastructure of Liberia and the death of 250,000 people. For that reason, a conflict may necessarily require a mediation process to quell it, to attain sustainable peace among persons of different cultural and historical descent, or those involved in the national conflict, as in the case of Liberia. So when conflict occurs, as it has done, based on a lot of political reasons, and I will do the analysis in episode 12. But right now we're just going over conflict, how to mediate conflict and how to manage it. So now that we had the conflict, when we had the conflict, there was a need for mediation. That mediation did not come early. The rebels were allowed to advance, to do more destruction in the country, without any kind of international intervention. Uh, at this juncture, especially as a survivor, victim of the Liberian genocide, I want to personally thank, uh, posthumously thank uh, President Babangida of Nigeria and Jerry Rawlings, the late Jerry Rawlings of Ghana, and other African leaders on the west coast of Africa who decided to intervene when the United States and the European nations remained silent and nonchalant about the carnage that was taking place in Liberia. These concerned African statesmen, stood up to the plate. They stepped up to the plate and said, no, we cannot allow this to happen in Africa. If nobody can do this, we as Africans must do it for ourselves, which of course falls in line with that kind of dream that Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Toure, and other conscientious African leaders, Tafawa Balewa, Namdi Azikiwe, and all these people, great African leaders who talked about Africa being for Africa, and that whenever we have a problem, we are the best people to solve our own problems. Those people, that decision that they made, will never be forgotten, because that was a great step. And it shows that if African leaders can always, put Africa first, put their country and their people first, it's possible that we can have a United States of Africa someday. But that conflict that took place in Liberia was fueled by a lot of people, nations, including the United Nations, the United States, France, Great Britain, what was that? Burkina Faso, the Ivory Coast, and they all had their own personal reasons for doing what they did, to empower the rebels, to empower someone to break jail from the United States and to travel to all these different countries without being rearrested. And that consequently, led to the death of over 250,000 people, including American Catholic nuns, soldiers, peacekeeping soldiers of the West African monitoring group, ECOMOG, etc. So when you have a conflict, there's always a need to mediate the conflict. So let's go to where we say to mediate the conflict. So we go to conflict having division, and then we say how to mediate conflicts. The word mediate means to act as a go-between. And this is what is important, for all Liberians to understand, that at this stage, whenever you see any kind of a hala, yo-yo, around you, please make it your duty, if you can, to mediate, to intervene, to make sure that that conflict is resolved or that it is quelled, even if you don't have the time to go into details to quell it, that at least we will take out that time for them to stop that confusion right there and then, so that it doesn't go any further, so that people don't get so angry that they hurt each other, stab each other, or shoot one another, or whatever it is. So the importance of mediation, the importance of a mediation in conflict resolution is very significant, especially in Liberia, where we've had the genocide, where people distrust one another and have hate against one another and all of that. We all must be mediators. So the word mediate means to act as a go-between. But to act as a go-between, one must first understand that there are always two sides to a conflict. So you're going there now to say you want to make peace or whatever it is, should not be biased. You shouldn't just jump into something you don't know, and just immediately take sides. That's not a way to mediate. So the first thing is that you must know, you must acknowledge that there are always two sides to a conflict. And then also you must be aware, you need to determine who was the aggressor, who was the first person to pick fuss, who's the first person, who was the first person that started this whole thing. How did it start? You want to know how did it start. You don't just jump in and say, oh my man, you're talking too loud, you're wrong. Maybe the person that's talking too loud is loud, that's why he's talking too loud, but he may not be the aggressor. Maybe the first person, it might be someone else who is the first person that picked fuss with him. So that's why it's also good for you to understand how did it start, to determine who the aggressor was, and then who the person that was aggressed is in the matter. The reason for that is because the aggressor or the person who starts a conflict or palaver may have done so probably because, say for instance, you, Jimmy, you heard from Martha that Sarah said so thing about you. When you heard that, you immediately develop some kind of, maybe bad emotions or bad feelings, about what you heard this person said about you, that now you develop an intrapersonal type of conflict and situation, emotional state of mind, that you are already angry, so, and it may not be true that this person said this about you, but after you heard that, you did not take your time to say, okay, I hear what you say. When I see Sarah, I will ask Sarah what she said and why she said it. And or sometimes the best way to really address those kinds of you say, I say stuff is that when that person brings that you say, I say thing to you, it's not that you want to discourage them from coming to inform you about things that people are saying about you and or are plotting against you, but you just want to make sure that story is true, that it was truly said by this person, because if you don't ask the person, you won't know whether it was true or not. Sometimes people lie, they say things and you go before them and they deny, that can happen. But serving as a mediator, you also want to make sure you find out who started this, who's the aggressor and who is the aggressed. Who was it that was being bullied, or that was being that was hit? There's something to, because sometimes the conflict can be violent. Sometimes you bear that in your mind, and as soon as you see Teresa, you put a slide in your ear, you whistle it there, pow! You say, oh, you see her, you slap me, what are you slapping me for? Then you went to Peter and you said so thing about me. No, I didn't say anything to Peter or so thing. So by the time you find out that what they told you wasn't true, you've already slapped wasted the person in a year. You see? So that's why it's always good to investigate first when people say this thing, because there are a lot of people these days that lie so much. They were not brought up in homes, you know, and we talked about that, you know, in one of the earlier episodes. They were not brought up in homes where, you know, your parents, they teach you how to manage your temper, how to investigate, to make sure that something is true before you react, and all those things. A lot of people don't have that kind of skill. They hear something and they just stick it. They hear this lie, they never confirm it, and they develop that hatred for you in their hearts. And you don't even know, you're not aware of it, you know. So it's always good to know who picked the fraud and who did this. But to be a mediator, you can't just jump out and you see the people, someone forcing to get on that. Oh, yeah, hold it. Like you're some kind of policeman, you want to go make peace. No, that's not how this process works. If those who are forcing, when you see them forcing and all of that, you know, you want to ask them, say, oh, my people, what happened, man? Why are you forcing at this for? You mind if I just, you know, let the two of you, let the three of us sit down, so I can ask some questions. Maybe I can be of help, you know, for regarding what's happening between the two of you. You know, first you got to get their permission. If you don't get a permission, there's no way, you don't have any right to start any kind of a mediation with anybody, because they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to you. You must get their permission so that they may be willing to listen. And even when you get their permission for them to listen, you got to set ground rules, because if you don't set the ground rules, you say, okay, who wants to talk first, who wants to talk last? Maybe the two of them will want to talk, they think they want to talk first. So maybe they have to flip a coin, you know, to say, okay, but that, you know, since the two of you want to talk at the same time, suppose you do a little Missy and Coco thing to see who wins that toss, you know, something like that, you know, something that is neutral, you know, that some kind of method that is neutral, that they won't say you're cheating, that you took sides from the beginning and all of that, but that automatically works itself out, you know, like the Coco and Missy type of thing, you know. Okay, so you do that, and then somebody emerges as the first speaker, and the other one, the second speaker, say, okay, based on this, Somo, you will speak first because you won the toss. Jimmy, you will speak after Somo finishes. But you must set ground rules. There must be ground rules set, and they must be adhered to by the parties concerned in the conflict. So after they've consented that, yes, you know, yeah, sure, you know, you're welcome to listen to what we say, because sometimes there are things they're fussing about that they may be very, you know, very confidential, that they don't even want to share with anybody. They'll be like, oh my goodness, if we don't even know this person, and they want to come mediate, we can't tell them our secret for them, go tell somebody else. So the other thing that I must make clear to you, first of all, you know, in the process of mediation, is that you must be aware of, and you must observe the rules of confidentiality, because it's important. People don't want to tell you their deep secret for it to be heard down the street the next minute after you leave them. That is betrayal. That is a kind of a criminal type of attitude, because now you betrayed the trust of the people who agreed to share their personal stories with you. When people share their personal stories with you, it's always good for you to keep them confidential as they wish. Unless if they say, well, it's okay, I don't mind, you can tell anybody, you know, then that's when that, and even at that, if it's anything that's so, you know, derogatory or whatever, is you don't necessarily have to tell anyone about it, even if they say you should tell them. But for you to release any kind of a personal issue, information that people share with you in your position as a mediator, you must observe confidentiality. You must. If you don't do that, that's bad and that's criminal because you are betraying the trust of the people in you. So you must set ground rules that they must adhere to. Meaning, because sometimes when people are angry, when you ask them, when this person is explaining, even after a toss, and someone is explaining his story, Miriam will just call, no, you lie, they're not it, they're not true, they're not just that. So then the process becomes very chaotic. But you want that mediation process to be orderly and also to actively engage and commit the people who are involved in the conflict, to commit them to resolving their own conflict. Actually, you're just helping them to resolve their own conflict, but you just want to make sure that there is calm, there's order, so that each one can express his own story. And you must possess active listening skills. The active listening skills aspect is important because if the person is saying, so so as I went on, you said you can't just sit there and just be silent and just let a person talk, because they may think you're not following the trend of their storyline. So as they talk, so as we went down the road, and then we came to this spot, and you say, you gotta let them know that you were there. So then when you came to the spot, what happened? Then it continue. You must do a kind of an intervention that allows the aggrieved person or the person engaged in the conflict the hope and the confidence that, oh, this person is really, really cares. They're really listening to what I'm saying, to give them that effort for them to really tell you the true story, that they want to relay, to you. So that aspect of it is very, very important, that you be an active listener. So being an active listener means that you are nodding your head, you are looking at them directly, you are paying attention to them. And then also, as you said, with the ground rules, you're also making sure that when one speaker is speaking, that the other person will listen, and that if they want to ask question, they must like raise their hand and say, excuse me, I got a question to ask regarding this and that, and to make it orderly. So the process has to be orderly, in order to go through. So let's go to the script. Let me do a little bit of that. So we said that in addition, parties to a conflict must first be willing to resolve their own palaver or ideological and cultural differences in order for an outsider who is a mediator to successfully resolve the conflict in a manner and style that may involve the active participation of parties to a conflict. Active participation, they must actively participate. Further, those who mediate in conflicts should lay down ground rules that demand the respect and fair participation of parties across the board. In other words, mediators must also have the guts to enforce the ground rules and consensual agreements that are reached by parties to a conflict without prejudice to anyone. Additionally, mediators must hold parties to a conflict accountable for their actions by enforcing the laws of the land and by enforcing international humanitarian and human rights laws where necessary without fear or favor to amicably and peacefully resolve conflicts. So I'm not just only talking about these just two individuals that you're mediating with, but even on the national level, where in Liberia we have so many warring factions that were going for peace conferences and all of that. The mediators should have, and some of them had, the guts, to enforce the ground rules and consensual agreements that were reached. Whereas some of the participants of the peace process Liberian peace process, those Liberian warlords and things, some of them did not adhere to what they agreed at the table. When it came back, they started shooting again, they started doing things, and all of that, breaking the ceasefire, etc., all those kinds of things. So as a mediator, we're talking on a lower level, say where the two individuals and you're mediating, but yet when they pass those ground rules, you must make sure that they adhere to the ground rules. When one person attempts to interrupt the other, you remember you said that we agreed that when one person is speaking, you will not interrupt them. If you want to speak, you will raise your hand and then I will recognize you. And then before you speak, so that you don't interrupt your friend. So that kind of thing, it will be your role to make sure that, you help them to adhere to what they promised to do. All right. So also, those who are engaged in conflict must be willing to speak the truth and to tell vividly their story. They must also be willing to listen to their opponents with open hearts and minds and without interruption, and vice versa. Through this cordial process, persons engaged in a conflict may be willing to give and take, to compromise in the best interest of both parties. Usually a win-win situation in which both parties take equal responsibility for their mistakes is a good way to start the mediation process because it shows that parties to a conflict are willing to take responsibility for their actions rather than being in self-denial of their actions. So this aspect of it is very, very important. Unfortunately, with respect to the Liberian conflict, the perpetrators are still in denial of their actions. They feel that what they did was right. It wasn't wrong for 250,000 people to die, for the country to be paralyzed, for people to suffer today as they're doing. They are now remorseful. And so that's one of the reasons why the Liberian peace process has stalled, because those who committed the atrocities are not remorseful. In this respect, mediating for peace may be easier than when parties to a conflict are in denial. In the case of the Liberian genocide, the perpetrators are in denial. Despite the huge destruction of lives and properties that subsequently led to a complete breakdown of Liberia's infrastructure, they continue to remain adamant, nonchalant, and to parade in the corridors of power and to flaunt their ill-gotten wealth in the presence of starving and disabled victims and survivors of their genocidal weaponry. So you can see what's happening in Liberia. What's happening in Liberia in conflict resolution, especially with respect to our own tradition and stuff. You see say for example, the husband and the wife in the home. The husband beat the woman up to, I don't know, number nonsense, her face all swollen, all bruises all on her face and all of that. And you find out that the husband just did that because of jealousy or whatever it is. And you go and give the husband best and you say, oh my man, you got best. You got best for beating your wife and bruising her up. You are rewarding the aggressor and telling the aggressor, because you are reinforcing that undesirable behavior of the aggressor by telling the husband that he was right for beating his wife brutally. So let's put it into the Liberian situation where the warlords and all those who bought weapons and stuff, give them to the young children to go and shoot and kill their own moms and fathers and other people. They went to the peace conference and listen to this commentary here that I'm going to read to you. I said, therefore, in no way, shape, or form should perpetrators or war criminals have been allowed to occupy positions of public trust and to dictate the terms of the peace accords that benefited them alone, but that forced the victimized Liberian populace to be subjugated to further human rights abuse, as was done during the intervention of ECOWAS and the United Nations in the resolution of the Liberian peace process. In the resolution of the Liberian peace process, what the international negotiators did was to reward the warlords, to reward those people that financed the killing of the people and destruction of the country, that committed treason and insurrection in the country. They went and rewarded this to allow them to hold position and to run for the presidency of the country. Whereas in the Western world, the same people who made that decision in the Liberian situation, in the Western world, those same people would put the warlords in jail for life. They will bar them from running for the presidency, from holding any office, from running to become senators, representatives, and cabinet ministers and all of that. They will never serve that in Europe or here in America. But they did that in Liberia, in contravention of the Constitution of Liberia. So when they did that, that's why the Liberian peace process has stalled. The conflict is not resolved yet. It's not resolved. It's at a very crucial and dangerous stage, because it's like a time bomb. Because when they did that, when the international negotiators did that, and we have rebel leaders becoming quote unquote president of Liberia, it subsequently empowered Liberian warlords and perpetrators of the Liberian genocide to further suppress their victims. The victims being the Liberian people whose moms, fathers, brothers, sisters they killed, as well as the victims' children, warlords and their cohorts used as child soldiers to regain political and economic power. So so the conflict resolution process that took place in the Liberian situation was a fiasco. It was not done properly. And that's why we're at the stage where we are today. In view of the foregoing, the current so-called post-conflict situation in Liberia was illegally set up in contravention of the Constitution of Liberia, because anybody who commits treason or so is not eligible to run for any political position, especially the presidency, vice presidency, etc. So that taking place, quote unquote, in the name of peace it's not in the name of peace, or in the name of war, because that's why we're still in a state of war in Liberia, because of that decision that was made, that would have never been made in Europe and in America, that were made to allow people who have perpetrated, heinous crimes against the people of Liberia to hold positions, and they're still holding positions in the country. That's against the Constitution of the Republic of Liberia. So victims and survivors of the Liberian nation Liberian genocide, live in constant fear and distrust in their hearts, as they struggle to find a meal to eat per day, with economic hardships increasing daily under the watchful eyes of the international community. So that's the situation that we have in Liberia today, where the perpetrators were empowered with state power and access to the coffers of the country. You actually go to mine your cassava leaf. Go, please, mama, cassava leaf, yeah. Are going on the farm. And you expect to have cassava leaf when you come back after you left goat in charge of your cassava leaf. That's where we are. Then the other thing here that we want to talk about is conflict management. Conflict management. No, you have a conflict that you need to mediate. And then after you mediate it, you must manage it. And that's where we are. The mediation process wasn't right. So now the management of the conflict in Liberia, we're having problem with it. And in order for you to manage a conflict, first of all, you must know the context in which the conflict occurred. The context that is used in a Liberian situation with respect to the conflict in Liberia is the notion, the general notion is that, is a conflict that is based on Congo versus country. No. As an expert in Liberian history and culture, the conflict is not just based on Congo and country. No. It's based on a lot of things that I will explain in the next episode, episode 12. It's based on a lot of socio-cultural issues, not just country and Congo. Today, we have country and Congo people married, got children, living together in peace and harmony. It got nothing to do with it. And the false notion also that, the country people were suffering because Congo people did this to them, they did that to them, they did this and that to them. No roads, no good hospitals, no this and that. It's been 40 years now, 42 years since the 1980 coup, when indigenous people took over the country. 42 years now. The same dirty roads still there in Liberia. Even worse now. So it's not that. That's not the Liberian issue. And that's why you need somebody like myself, who's ingrained in the history and culture of the country to advise you, the Liberian people, regarding what we can do for us to rebuild our country. Our issue is not about country and Congo. I'm married to an American Liberian for almost 40 years with no confusion, nothing. Got children, got grandchildren, no confusion. So it's not about no Congo and country. It's about the dishonesty. Dishonesty. It's about dishonesty. Bad decisions, selfishness, people holding high positions of trust and betraying the trust of the people that elected them to office. That's what it's about. It's not about country and Congo. That's not the Liberian issue. If you want to know what the Liberian issue is, I want you to listen to episode 12. You will know what the Liberian issue is and what we have to do, what we must do as Liberians to resolve that issue. It can be resolved. Misevaluation of the Liberian genocide that is referred to as a civil war. You're talking about it's a 14-year war. It's not a 14-year war. The war is still ongoing. The genocide is still ongoing. Genocide has two phases. And in my next discussion lecture, I will explain to you why I consider what took place in Liberia to be a genocide. Genocide has two phases. It has the active part where the people go from door to door looking for a specific group of people to kill them, like they did in the Liberian, genocide. going from door to door looking for crown people, looking for minor people, looking for Kyo people, looking for Mandingo people, looking for Muslims, and all of that. That's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it is where these people, they have, traumatized the people are scared of them. They suffer from Stockholm, syndrome, like the way Liberians are today, traumatized by the war and fearful of their former warlords who are holding big positions, and they're squandering the money. They're doing anything they want to do. They're paying themselves huge sums of salary when people can't even find 1 cent to eat, when there's no money to supply the schools, the hospitals, to build better roads and all of that. They got what's that? Benefits up to the tune of $1.5 million for one individual. $1 million, so and so $900 some more $1,000 for someone benefit, aside from their take home pay and all of that. That's why the judicial system is hampered. They can't even control the cases. They can't even hear the cases because they lack the logistical support to do it, because one person got that $1.5 million for benefit that's supposed to go to the judiciary to get interpreters, to train the personnel to do a lot of things for that particular wing of the Liberian government, which is very important in this post or genocide period, because these are our experts, legal experts and practitioners who are charged with the responsibility to interpret the law. Those who violated the laws, they have that responsibility to interpret it to us and to tell us what the Constitution says with respect to those who committed treason, who incited the citizens, caused insurrection in the country, so that they can be addressed appropriately in a legal manner, peaceful legal manner, in consonance with the rule of law, or the principles of the rule of law. And that is not being done. So that's part of the thing. So the other thing with respect to conflict resolution that's important is that when that's important to mediate also, is that when you to manage the thing is that when all individuals who once were in conflict with each other but that peacefully resolved their conflict must immediately be willing to inform their supporters and friends that were informed about the conflict. So supporters from both sides of the fence may respect the decision of those who are in conflict to resolve their differences. So John and Peter had conflict. They finally came, the conflict was mediated, and they finally came to the agreement. Okay, I'm so sorry for what I did. The other person said, oh, I'm so sorry too. And they shake hands, The conflict is over now. But during the time of the conflict, John told his friends, close friends and relatives, oh, Peter did this to me, Peter did that to me. And Peter did the same thing to his friends and family. John did this and John did that to me. So when they decide to resolve their conflict in the absence of these people that they told, after they decided to resolve their conflict, they must go back and tell, because Liberians, they got a lot of church police. Oh my man, I saw John the other day when he lay ugly self. When they say something like that after you have resolved your conflict with John, I say, oh no. Let's forget about that, because actually John and myself, we met and we discussed harmonize our agreement, our disagreement. So we're good now, we're cool. So please, anywhere you see John, please don't even mention that again, because we are okay. You gotta tell these church police that are already hard, who always like to be in the center and to take control of other people's issues. You gotta explain to them and say, look, brother, sister, this person myself are on good times now. And when you see them, please don't say anything bad to them, because we all want people. You yourself gotta say that too. Because if you don't do that, then they continue to expand that confusion, that conflict that has already been resolved. So sometimes that's why sometimes you may be confused. You say, oh, but wait a minute, I mean, John and myself, we harmonize our differences and things. So how come I'm speaking to his sister and she's not talking to me? You know, because his sister, John may have told his sister things that you said or you did to him that made his sister to just automatically, you know, keep grudge against you without even investigating why she's doing that, you know. So that's why it's good when you resolve a conflict. You want to make sure that you share the information with other people. So managing conflict, we've said that you must be aware the context of the issue and all of that. And I will just give you a little brief something there for you to understand. Because the conflict can be very, very, you know, complex. You and John are having this disagreement, but John has, well, if John is married, John has a wife, John has children, John has his parents, John has his siblings, John has friends, he has workmates. So some people, when things happen, they don't keep it to themselves. They go all around explaining the thing. And as they explain the thing, the information, you know, expands and it widens. The information becomes different. Everybody adds his own story to it. You see, so how do you manage something like that after, you know, you've been, made peace with a person? It's the same thing with the Liberian situation. They said most times a conflict has the potential to develop from a discord between two individuals to a family feud, and or it may expand to an ethnic or national warfare if a conflict is not properly managed from the onset. So you saw what happened, you know, in Liberia. Say for instance, I just take the 1985, you know, incursion from Sierra Leone with what's his name, General Kwiwompa, leading that incursion against the Dole government. Okay, that's Kwiwompa that did it. Not the Geo people. The Geo people didn't go to a meeting and say, Kwiwompa, you must come and invade Liberia, you know. But because of ignorance and lack of investigation, you know, people who were in the Dole government, especially some crown people from his bubble, you know, or sect of the country, went on a rampage looking for innocent, you know, Nimba people, you know, to harm them, to kill them, you know, to do things to them. They were taking the law in their own hands. When those individuals do that, and they were crown, you know, people doing that, the crown people didn't tell them to go and do it. So that's why the Constitution is important. That's why rule of law is important. You hold the person who commits the crime responsible, not the tribe, the ethnic group that they come from. You see what I'm talking about? So not investigating and not being sober-minded. People say, oh, that you people came to do this, oh, that crown people that do this and that, blah, blah, blah. And it expanded that confusion between Do and Kwiwompa were friends. They were members of the armed forces of Liberia. Their friendship went a long ways when they started their struggle, you know, in the armed forces of Liberia, which had nothing to do with you and myself. But look how people just jump into it, into the center of it, and created confusion. And the politicians, not being so vicious and uneducated about the history and culture of the country, you know, they took that to the next level. And the next thing you know was it became a confusion between two friends. But he was commanding general. I think the president Joe wanted him to be speaker or something at that time. He said, no, I want to be my soldier. I don't want to go in the barracks. They had their own confusion, this and that. Confusion between two friends ended up with confusion expanded to inter-ethnic conflicts. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So that's what we're talking about today. So how do we handle something like that? So that when people, when an individual commits a crime, that the person will be held responsible for the consequences of the action and not for you to blame the ethnic group that it comes from. That's part of the management of conflict. So then, well, for instance, I'll give you an example. Say, greater care should be taken from the beginning of a conflict to its possible end so that it does not widen from a small scale to a fully blown up international warfare or human catastrophe. For instance, a close examination of the Liberian conflict reflects that adequate care was not taken to evaluate the nature of the rebel incursion so as to make informed decisions that would have led to its successful and speedy conclusion when the Liberian genocide started on December 24th, 1989. So, you know, all the things that Chief Goyon told me, I said, oh, I see some people coming in the country, they got guns, they're doing this, they're doing that. I said, Chief Goyon, shut up. You know what you're talking. The Minister of Internal Affairs, when he ordered people, because the people in the hinterland, they got a single barrel guns and they hunters or whatever that. They started disarming the people to make a better way for the rebels to easily penetrate and come into the country. And because they were taking it lightly, they started growing. Say at that time, the Liberian crisis was considered, quote unquote, an internal affair, an internal matter, and a civil war. It was going to be a civil war that did not warrant the participation or involvement of the international community based on a non-interference clause of the charters of the UN, AU, ECOWAS organizations. The non-interference clause forbids member states to interfere into the internal affairs of sister or member states. However, an internal conflict may require the involvement of the international community if those involved in the internal conflict violate not only the constitution of their own country, but if they also violate international humanitarian and human rights laws that demand the humanitarian intervention of the international community. So that's what happened in the Liberian case. People say, oh, you know, that just Liberians doing their own thing and doing this and that, blah, blah, blah. But when it started going from door to door and looking for special type of crime, ethnic groups, crime, Manonquio, Mandingo, Muslims, government, workers, soldiers, this, that, blah, 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 it became of concern because now they have changed from being, quote unquote, a civil war to a genocide. And that's when, you know, Babangida and other people said, not a bit of faith, that's a little too much. That's a little too much. And they had to intervene. You see, so it's very important, you know, for us all, you know, to be mediators, to help to manage conflict and so forth. But as I said, and I repeat myself, that the issue in Liberia today is not the false notion of Congo versus country. Rather, it is the fact is that there are devious, bad politicians and liars, thieves, who use this as an umbrella to create confusion among the people of Liberia so they can exploit them. And this program is dedicated to informing you and giving you the accurate record and information you need so that you will love your fellow countrymen, whether it's country or Congo. We are all Liberians, that you will love your fellow countrymen and love your country, and that we will all work together to build a successful Liberia. I want to stop here for now. In the next episode, we will analyze Liberia's conflict based on historical and cultural eras so that you'll understand that a lot of the things that have happened in Liberia, are not just only based on country and Congo, but there are a whole lot of technical issues, cultural and political issues that we all must collectively address before our national crisis can be resolved, amicably and legally resolved for us to move forward. I want to thank you so much for listening to this program. And I also want to thank our sponsors who are assisting us to raise the funds to pay for the airtime for you to listen to this program. I want to thank the radio broadcasters, those who work at the various radio stations who air our program. We want to say thank you to Daniel Buell of Radio Advance, 93.7 in Morovia. I want to say thank you to Brian Dio of Radio Phoenix, 102.7 in Harper City. And we also want to thank Father Tasia, acting manager, director of the Santos Media Incorporated of the Catholic Paraclete Radio FM 93.7 in Banga, Vaughan County. I want to say thank you to Mrs. Juliana Kofa Dixon, our board chair. I'm the chair for the fundraising committee, and Ways and Means Committee, and also our chairman, Timothy Gardner, for all the assistance that he renders us. We want to say thank you also to Mrs. D. Sheba Brown, who is chair of the DATI Liberia Board of Directors. And thanks to all of you out there who will continue to listen to our program. Please share the information with others. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.